They say queens give birth in gold. But this one? She gave birth in chains. No velvet sheets, no royal midwives whispering sweet nothings. Just a slab of stone, slick with sweat and shame. Just iron cuffs biting into skin. Just the echo of her scream ricocheting off dungeon walls no one dared to name. Her name was Maria Theresa of Naples, an empress, a daughter of kings, a wife sent to rule, then forgotten behind iron doors. The moment her labor began, the empire turned away, as if birth, when it comes from a disgraced womb, becomes an act of defiance, as if pain, when suffered by a woman behind bars, is no longer human. But pain doesn't care for politics. It tore through her body like wolves through silk. It came in waves, red and raw, under torchlight that flickered like doubt. And when the child came, it did not cry. Only she did. Today, we peel back the silence, not just to hear her voice, but to hear the chains. Before the chains, there was music. In the palaces of Naples, where sunlight spilled like honey across marble floors, Maria Theresa of Naples first opened her eyes to a world that glittered. She was born into velvet, into a kingdom where the hem of her dress never touched dirt, and her footsteps were muffled by silk rugs woven in Persia. Her father, Ferdinand IV of Naples, ruled a court obsessed with appearances, masks, operas, painted ceilings, and perfectly arranged smiles. And her mother, Maria Carolina of Austria, daughter of Empress Maria Theresa, sister to Marie Antoinette, a woman carved from ambition and paranoia, whose spine was straighter than any crown she wore. Maria Theresa, the child, was not allowed to run. She glided, like a porcelain doll with perfect posture and no voice. They taught her French before she could say "Mama." Latin lullabies replaced lullabies of warmth. Every meal was a lesson, every bow a calculation, every blink an expectation. She was not raised to love. She was raised to obey. And yet, there were moments, tiny rebellions hidden in the folds of brocade. Once she tore her gloves just to feel the roughness of bark. Once she pressed her ear to the marble wall just to listen to the world beyond. The hooves of horses, the cries of vendors, the laughter of a girl not born royal. But such indulgences were punished, not with whips, but with silence. Her mother would simply turn her back, and that hurt more. To be born royal is to be born watched. And Maria Theresa? She was watched like a precious bird that must never learn to fly. In the garden, they placed her in a wrought iron gazebo wrapped with white roses. It looked like a fairy tale. But to her, it was a cage pretending to be a crown. She wasn't alone, always surrounded by tutors, maids, priests, always someone ready to remind her who she was, or rather, what she was meant to become. And even as a child, she sensed it. One night, while watching fireworks over the Bay of Naples, she whispered, "Do they explode because they want to be free?" Her governess scolded her. "Don't think like that. A queen must burn quietly." The phrase haunted her. Even at 10, Maria Theresa understood her destiny had been inked long before she was born. Every letter of her name was stitched into treaties, arranged into dowries, balanced against borders and dynasties. She would not marry for love. She would marry for power. And so, she smiled. Practiced, perfect, hollow. The kind of smile you give when the stage is full and you're the lead, but you've forgotten the lines. By the time she turned 12, whispers already floated through the court. She will be sent north. A match with the Holy Roman Empire. Vienna awaits. She knew the name of her future husband before she had a favorite flower. Francis II. A man molded by empire and shadow, older than her by years, yet somehow just as trapped. She had never met him, but already her body was being measured for a wedding dress. Childhood ended not with a bang, but with a stitch. A seam pulled tight, a corset laced to suffocate. And behind her eyes, the music of Naples faded. She would not laugh like a girl again. She would learn to walk like an empress. But beneath the layers of ceremony, silk, and silence, a question remained. If I was born into gold, why does it feel so heavy? They dressed her in pearls, not the kind that whispered elegance, but the kind that weighed down the collarbones like guilt. Each one a tiny symbol of peace treaties, broken alliances, dowries soaked in compromise. Maria Theresa did not walk to her wedding. She was shipped. From Naples to Vienna, in a gilded carriage with velvet cushions that could not soften the ache. The road wound through foreign lands, and so did her thoughts, through fear, through duty, through prayers that felt more like apologies. She was just 16, old enough, they said, to be an empress. Young enough to still dream that maybe, just maybe, the man waiting for her at the altar might look at her like a person. He didn't. Francis II, Holy Roman Emperor, was no monster, but he was no savior either. He was quiet, formal, bound to his own shackles of lineage and legacy. He kissed her hand like she was already marble. Their wedding was a performance, lit with chandeliers, blessed by bishops, and smothered in applause. But Maria Theresa noticed something no one else did. The doors to the chapel locked from the outside. That night, she sat alone in a bed too large, beneath portraits of emperors who had died unloved. The sheets were monogrammed. The walls echoed nothing. When Francis finally entered, he offered a bow, not a touch. Their first night together passed like an awkward truce. Two strangers with matching crowns. Two bodies kept apart by the chill of dynastic purpose. In court, she became Her Imperial Majesty. But behind the title, she was something else. A southern girl in a northern winter. They didn't understand her. Her accent, her warmth, her need to speak with her hands. They called her emotional, dramatic, unsuitable. Even when she tried to adapt, to quiet herself, to fold her personality into protocol, it was never enough. Worse still, her body was expected to perform, to produce, to justify her place through sons and daughters who could be betrothed before they could breathe. And so began the cycle. Conceive, wait, bleed, cry, begin again. The first miscarriage came like a thief in the night. No mourning allowed, no public announcement, just a doctor's sigh and a midwife's silence. She buried her grief in a drawer lined with lace meant for the child that never came. And then came the whispers. Perhaps she's not strong enough. Maybe the Austrian blood rejects the Neapolitan flower. But the worst voice was her own. What if I was not meant to be a mother? What if I am just a vessel dressed in silk? Francis grew more distant, He found solace in paperwork, not in her eyes. They dined together like diplomats, spoke like colleagues, slept like strangers. The palace halls were colder in Vienna. Even the chandeliers looked like icicles, beautiful, sharp, and silent. Her mother wrote letters urging her to be firm, to bear children, to charm the empire. But each word felt like an iron nail hammered into her ribs. "I am not a woman," she once whispered into her pillow. "I am a treaty." Her only comfort came in fleeting moments. The feel of a violin beneath her chin, the rare laughter of a maid who forgot her place, the sound of rain tapping the window like a forgotten lullaby. But Vienna was not Naples. And Maria Theresa of Naples was not allowed to be Maria Theresa anymore. She was an empress, a role, a title stitched into ledgers and carved into stone, but not into love. And as the years passed, her reflection changed. Not her face, but her gaze. It had become something else. Not broken, not angry, but resigned. The gaze of a bird that has stopped flying but still sings because it remembers what the sky once felt like. Empires rarely fall in a day, but women inside them, they shatter quietly. Maria Theresa had not failed. She had not plotted treason, insulted a king, nor dishonored her name. She had done exactly what they asked. Married well, smiled in silence, swallowed each grief like it was holy wine. But somehow, it was not enough. It began with the glances. Not from peasants, not from enemies, but from the women of court. A tilt of the head, a whisper behind a fan. "The Neapolitan wife," they said. "Still no heir? She cries too easily. She reads too much. She is not Austrian." One ambassador noted in his report, "She possesses grace, but there is a heat in her. Something southern, something hard to control." That heat was her humanity, and that made her dangerous. When Francis's advisors gathered without her, she noticed. When letters stopped arriving from Naples, she noticed. When her own servants were replaced by more reliable ones, she noticed. One by one, the doors began to close. The salons, the council chambers, even the nursery. When she became pregnant again, no one congratulated her. When she miscarried again, no one mourned. The empire had turned her into a statue and now resented her for not moving. She begged Francis to let her return to Naples for a season. "To breathe," she said. He said nothing, just signed another document. The crack widened. Then came the rumors that she had written secret letters to her brothers in Sicily, that she wept alone in the chapel and spoke of fleeing, that she had once struck a servant during a night terror. None of it could be proven. None of it needed to be. In a court built on mirrors, all it took was a shadow. And then, the fire. In 1805, with the Napoleonic Wars roaring through Europe like a fever, Vienna teetered. Enemies approached, allies crumbled, and every member of the royal household became a suspect. Maria Theresa became convenient, a foreign-born empress. No powerful sons, no loyal faction, and a heart too easily bruised. They did not accuse her, not openly. They simply removed her from view. A temporary retreat, they called it. Medical rest, they whispered. She was escorted not to a villa, not to a spa, but to a cold stone estate north of Vienna. The windows barred, The staff unfamiliar. The guards armed, silent, ever present. No charges, no trial, just disappearance. In the Empire's records, her name faded. She was not divorced, not widowed, not dead, just omitted. And in her letters, those few they allowed, she stopped signing as Maria Theresa, Empress. Instead, she wrote simply, "I remain, your obedient daughter." It was not a signature. It was a surrender. Inside the walls of her exile, time dissolved. The mirrors were gone. The silk was replaced by coarse linen. The food was cold. The prayers colder. She was allowed to walk the grounds, but never alone. She was allowed to speak, but only to those who would not speak back. She was allowed to write, but only what they dictated. And yet, even in this place of shadows, the fire inside her refused to die. She began to sing. Not opera, not hymns, but soft Neapolitan lullabies. Songs from a time before Vienna. Songs that smelled of lemon trees and sea salt. The guard said nothing, but a maid once whispered, "She sings as if she's calling someone who forgot where to find her." Then her body betrayed her again, a swelling, a nausea, a rhythm beneath her ribs. Pregnant. No one knew how. No one asked. And she said nothing. Some believed the father was Francis, one final duty. Others suspected darker truths, rumors whispered with clenched teeth. But it didn't matter, because in that moment, Maria Theresa understood. Her womb was the last territory they could not occupy without blood. And what they feared was not the child. It was the possibility that she might become powerful again. It began with blood, not the sacred kind that sealed marriages or signed treaties, but the raw, quiet kind. A drop, then a stain, then nothing but fear. Maria Theresa pressed her hands against her belly, praying to feel movement. A flutter, a kick, anything. But all she felt was stone. Beneath her feet, beneath her skin, within her heart. She was 5 months along when they stopped allowing her to walk the garden. They said it was for her safety, but she knew better. The Empire had decided, this child, if born, must not be seen. She became an exhibit, a body under surveillance. Every meal was inspected, every letter censored, even her chamber pot was watched. The room where they confined her had once been a library. Now, it was her cell. The books gone, the windows shuttered. Only dust remained, coating her lungs, her skin, her hope. And the pain grew, not like a thunderclap, but like a candle melting. Slow, constant, relentless. Her back screamed, her joints cracked, her breath came shallow. The nausea never left. It clung to her like a ghost. There were no midwives, only a single old woman, mute with trembling hands, sent to observe her progress. She carried no medicine, no comfort, just a ledger where she marked the days with ink the color of dried blood. Maria Theresa began to dream of water, not cool rivers, but drowning. She saw herself submerged, belly swollen, hair floating like seaweed. In the dream, the child inside her opened its mouth, not to cry, but to scream underwater. She woke each time in sweat, alone, The chains on her ankles remained. Yes, chains. They said it was for security. They said a fall could be dangerous. But she knew the truth. The Empire did not fear her escape. It feared her survival. One evening, as twilight bled into the floorboards, she coughed up blood. A thin thread, dark as rust, against her pillow. The old woman nodded, wrote something in her ledger, and left without a word. No physician came. Maria Theresa curled into herself, pressing her forehead to the cold wall, whispering prayers in a dialect no one in Vienna cared to understand anymore. She spoke to the child, not with lullabies, but with confessions. You were not meant to be born here, not in this dark, not into this silence. But if you come out breathing, I will believe in something again. Her hands were thin now, translucent, the veins like blue ink on parchment. Her skin, once kissed by southern suns, had become pale as unbaked bread. Time no longer passed. It decayed. Her fingernails grew brittle, her hair matted. She no longer stood. She hovered between lying down and collapsing. Each day she watched a crack in the ceiling widen. It became her calendar, her only companion. Until the day came when the crack dripped water, not from rain, from pipes above, sewage. The Empire had placed her in the underbelly of its own architecture. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was grotesque. Even the ceiling weeps for me, she whispered, and it doesn't even have a womb. Her abdomen tightened. A coil, a storm. The child was coming. No ceremony, no doctor, no clean sheets, only stone, only fear, only the sound of iron links dragging as she shifted, trying to brace herself. She called for help. No one answered. She bit her own shawl to stifle her scream. It tasted of dust and despair. And still, the child came, pushing, demanding, a primal declaration that, even in darkness, something still dared to be born. She tore, she bled, she convulsed. The pain was no longer pain. It was fire without light. It was a violin string snapping inside her spine. It was the sound of angels gagged by protocol. And when the baby emerged, wet, silent, trembling, she held it with hands too weak to hold anything else. "You are the last piece of me," she gasped. "The one they couldn't chain." The old woman returned, took the child without meeting her eyes, left the door open just long enough for the wind to slip in. And in that gust, Maria Theresa wept. Not for herself, but because the child didn't cry. They took the child. No explanation, no name, no sound. Maria Theresa asked once, then again. Her voice cracked like frost underfoot. "Is it a boy?" No answer. "Does it live?" Still no answer. "Will I see it?" The silence screamed louder than any verdict. For days or weeks, she could no longer tell. She lay in the same position, arms curved in a cradle with nothing inside. Even gravity forgot her. She floated in grief that had no language. And then, the mind began to fray. It started subtly. She heard footsteps that weren't there, lullabies no one sang, laughter, small, childlike, echoing just beyond the wall. She whispered back to it, at first out of instinct, then out of need. "Are you there?" she asked the crack in the ceiling. Do you miss me too? She began naming shadows. One was her son, one was her sister, one was the girl she had been in Naples, the one who once asked if fireworks exploded because they longed to be free. Her eyes no longer blinked often. They stared, as if watching a memory play out in the dust. When guards entered, she smiled. "Shh," she'd say. "You'll wake him." Sometimes she tore scraps from her bedsheets to make tiny blankets. She folded them, rocked them, sang to them. One guard asked the mute attendant, "Has she gone mad?" The woman only shrugged. But in Maria Theresa's cell, madness was not a crack. It was a door. One she had opened, willingly, because the real world had bolted every other shut. In her hallucinations, she saw herself at court again, dressed in white, crowned with stars. She walked down marble stairs with a child in each arm, smiling, adored, whole. But the dream always ended the same way. The child's face would dissolve, and in its place, a reflection of herself, screaming silently from a mirror that would not shatter. She began writing letters on the walls, with fingers dipped in blood. When ink was gone, messages no one could read. Messages to God, to ghosts, to herself. If I am forgotten, I will remember louder. If my body is a prison, let my mind be the riot. She feared sleep. It brought her to places too warm, too kind, and waking from them was like drowning in ice. So she stayed awake, counting the creaks in the floorboards, holding conversations with shadows who never interrupted. One day, she asked the guard, "Do you ever feel your skin doesn't belong to you?" As if it's a costume sewn by strangers who never asked if it fit. The man said nothing. But later, they sent a priest. The priest wore white, spoke in Latin, tried to bless her. She laughed. "You speak in the same language they used to sign my exile. Why would I trust a tongue that betrayed me?" He left, and with him, so did the last piece of reality. She began to see the child again, this time older, walking, singing. He would place imaginary flowers at her feet and say, "Don't be sad, mother. I'm only waiting for you." Was he real? She didn't care. In a world where her name was erased, where her body was bruised by duty, where her voice was deemed hysteria, madness was mercy. And in her madness, she built a palace, one only she could see. Its walls were soft, its windows open, its halls echoed only laughter. In this place, she was not Maria Theresa of Naples, not the failed Empress, not the exiled womb, not the prisoner. She was simply a mother, holding her child. And no one, not even the empire, could take that from her. Maria Theresa did not die on a battlefield. She did not die in childbirth. She did not die in the arms of a weeping husband or surrounded by candlelight and choir. She died the way the forgotten die, quietly, piece by piece. It began in her legs. The blood stopped flowing properly. Her feet turned the color of spoiled milk. The chains remained, though she could no longer walk. As if even in paralysis, she might still try to flee. Then came the cough. Wet, thick, red around the edges. Each breath rattled like a window in a storm, each exhale a confession. She began to smell herself. A sick, sweet odor clung to her skin, the scent of organs laboring in vain, of a body losing the argument with time. She whispered apologies to the walls. "Forgive me. I meant to be stronger." No doctors came, only the same mute woman who changed her sheets without looking her in the eye. The linen stuck to her thighs, her back blistered from the damp. When she spoke now, it was to the ceiling. Do you think they'll write about me? Or will I be a footnote in someone else's failure? The ceiling did not respond. One morning she tried to sit up. She collapsed before she even reached her elbows. Her arms no longer obeyed. And then, her vision narrowed. Colors dulled. Light dimmed. The world became a tunnel. She saw her son again. Not in a vision this time, but as if he were real, standing at the end of that tunnel. He held out his hand, and she, weak, skeletal, half gone, reached for him. But before her fingers could touch, the light snapped shut. A guard found her the next day, face turned to the wall, eyes open, lips parted, not in terror, but in something worse, acceptance. She had not screamed. She had not fought. She had slipped beneath the surface like a name dropped in a well. They did not ring bells. They did not declare a mourning period. They did not embalm her in state. They simply removed her. One cart, no insignia, no procession, just wheels turning through back alleys while Vienna yawned. Her body was not laid in a tomb. It was stored in a convent cellar beneath stone too heavy to lift without orders. And no orders ever came. No portrait was painted, no poem written, no statue raised. Only a single line in an imperial register, scratched hastily in a corner. Maria Theresa of Naples, deceased. Natural causes suspected, no further inquiry. As if trauma could be called natural. As if neglect was a quiet sort of mercy. The empire had not executed her, but it had starved her of everything that makes a life worth living. And in that way, it was more efficient than any guillotine. When Maria Theresa died, nothing changed. No rebellions rose in her name. No pamphlets spread in the streets. No courtier dropped their goblet in grief. Vienna, as always, kept moving. Like a clock tower whose gears grind on even as the people beneath it rot. Her husband, Francis II, was informed discreetly. A folded note. A brief nod from an advisor. Your wife has passed. His response was equally spare. Very well. To history's credit, or perhaps its shame, he never mentioned her again. Not in speeches, not in journals, not even in prayers. The courtiers followed suit. They removed her portraits, burned her letters, scraped her initials from the back of ceremonial silver. Within a month, it was as though she had never reigned, never married, never bled in their name. The child, whose very existence had once caused such unease, was taken into custody by the crown. It was a boy. His name was changed. His birth record sealed. He was raised in a remote estate under the supervision of a cold governess, taught never to ask about his mother. You were born into duty, they told him. That is all you need to know. And yet somewhere in the boy's eyes, wide, dark, and watchful, there lingered something untaught, a sadness unspoken, a knowledge that the silence in his blood was heavier than any crown he might ever wear. Maria Theresa's death created no martyr, no myth, only absence. But absence can be loud. It echoes in rooms where no one dares speak her name. It lingers in footnotes that historians glance at, but do not cite. It hums through the corridors of palaces that prefer their ghosts compliant. One archivist, decades later, found fragments. A handkerchief embroidered with MTN, a torn letter referencing the Southern Empress who did not weep when the midwife arrived. A ledger with pages missing, burnt or bitten away by time. He inquired. He was told to redirect his interest. He didn't. Months later, he was reassigned. His notes were lost. Empires are expert at burying what doesn't serve them. Not with dirt, but with policy, with revisions, with enough silence to make truth seem like madness. And yet, in Naples, her homeland, rumors endured. Old women said they still heard crying in the catacombs. Nuns in a forgotten convent claimed a ghost touched their hands when they prayed for lost children. One singer in the port whispered that every time she sang a Neapolitan lullaby, she felt someone weep behind her, even when alone. None of it provable, all of it real. Because a woman like Maria Theresa does not vanish. She is erased. And erasure is not the same as disappearance. The empire survived. But something inside it did not. Something tender, something just, something human. And no marble statue could ever cover that wound. History has always preferred its women simple. Saint or sinner, angel or traitor. But Maria Theresa of Naples refused such economy. Even in death, she disturbed the archive. To some, she was a liability, a southern flower ill-suited for the frost of Vienna. They say she brought chaos with her accent, instability with her womb, emotion into the veins of a machine designed for obedience. They call her fragile, unfit, a woman whose greatest flaw was not understanding the language of silence. One historian, decades later, described her as a misaligned piece in a well-oiled imperial puzzle. Another referred to her as an empress in name, a prisoner in spirit. But others began to question that framing. Was it fragility or refusal? Was her collapse the result of hysteria or the final scream of someone trapped in a cage built by laws, lineage, and men who never learned to listen? Was her silence a symptom or a sentence? The debate flared briefly in academic circles. A handful of scholars began excavating scraps, letters in Neapolitan dialect, servant journals. One unsigned portrait found hidden behind a wall in Schönbrunn Palace. In that portrait, she stands not as an empress, but as a woman in white. No crown, one hand resting on her belly, the other reaching toward the edge of the frame, as if asking to be remembered. Still, controversy drowned the truth. Some accused revisionists of romanticizing her. Others claimed the empire had done what it must, that Maria Theresa had destabilized the court and her removal had preserved the realm. History is written by survivors, they said, and survivors, it seems, are rarely women bleeding behind locked doors. One unsettling fact remains. No official cause of death was ever declared, no autopsy, no state report, just whispers. And whispers, like rot, do not die easily. They infected the walls of Vienna's old records. They stained the stone in the cellar where she was left. They breathed into the ink of letters never sent. In Naples, a few persisted. Poets spoke of the daughters swallowed by the north. Singers hummed lullabies said to have been hers. The chapel still lights a candle each year. No plaque, no name, just a flickering flame beside an empty chair. And in recent decades, voices have grown louder. She was not weak. She was isolated. She was not mad. She was unheard. She did not disappear. She was removed. The debate is unresolved. Perhaps it always will be. But one thing is certain. Maria Theresa of Naples was not undone by failure. She was undone by design, a system that grooms girls into symbols, that crowns them with duty and then punishes them for bleeding, that demands silence, then calls them mad when they whisper. And perhaps the most grotesque verdict of all is that no verdict was ever delivered. Just the ongoing question left unanswered. What happens to a woman who fulfills her role yet still does not survive it? There is no monument to Maria Theresa of Naples, no statue carved in alabaster, no mausoleum guarded by angels, no golden inscription detailing her lineage or loss. What remains is quieter, stranger, harder to find. In a forgotten wing of Schönbrunn Palace, behind a wall long thought solid, restorers found a hidden alcove. Inside it, a single canvas, unframed, unnamed, uncatalogued. The figure on the canvas is unmistakably her, but not as an empress. There is no crown, no ermine robe, no coat of arms stitched into the fabric. She stands barefoot, her dress simple, white linen, creased and imperfect, like something worn in sleep or captivity. Her eyes, though, hold the weight of two lives. One lived in gilded halls, the other behind iron doors. And in those eyes, something haunting lingers. Not accusation, not forgiveness, but presence, as if to say, you tried to erase me, but I remained. In the background of the painting, almost invisible, hangs a broken chain. At her feet, a rose, wilting but not yet dead. No signature, no date, only brushstrokes soaked with knowledge that whoever painted her remembered. Today, the portrait is not displayed. It resides in storage, labeled anonymously. Southern woman, unknown origin. But the archivists know. They whisper. Some say a cleaning woman once stood before it and wept, without knowing why. Others claim the room grows colder whenever the painting is unwrapped, as if memory chills the air. Elsewhere, another fragment. A single cradle, discovered in a storeroom beneath a convent outside Vienna. Tiny, hand-carved, painted with faded Neapolitan patterns, lemons, waves, sunlight. Inside it, folded carefully, lay a blanket, embroidered initials, MTN. The cradle was never recorded in inventory. When asked about it, the nuns offered no answer. It was left here, they said, by someone who came in the night and never returned. And in a crypt deep under the city, near the Capuchin tombs, lies an unmarked stone. No candle burns, no name carved, just stone. Some say it is hers. Others say she was never buried there. But once a year, on the day of her death, someone places a single white glove upon it. No note, no flowers, just that glove. Delicate, feminine, slightly torn at the fingertips, as if someone once tried to climb out. But perhaps the most enduring image is one that lives not in objects, but in air. In the narrow alley where carriages once passed, locals report the sound of lullabies, barely audible just beneath the wind. Software Southern, sung in dialect long forgotten. One line repeats over and over, "Dormi, dormi, figlio mio." Sleep, sleep, my child. No one knows who sings. No one has ever seen her. But they say, if you follow the song far enough into the dark, you'll come to a door that should not exist. And if you knock, no one answers. But something breathes on the other side. Let us not romanticize this. Maria Theresa of Naples was not a heroine in the way stories like to shape them. She led no armies. She gave no speeches. She did not rise above her pain in defiance of power. No, she sank, quietly, like a ship that was never seaworthy, built only to look beautiful in the harbor. She was born into power and then betrayed by it, exalted, then erased, crowned, then chained. And in that arc, there is no tragedy more perfect, because nothing kills more completely than expectation. We expect royal women to endure, to bleed in private, to love their captors, to smile with broken teeth and call it grace. But Maria Theresa did not endure. She withered, she faded, and finally, she disappeared, or so they wanted. Because disappearance is not death. It's erasure with intent. It is a system making sure her name does not cause discomfort, that her image does not haunt the walls of empire, that her suffering is filed under necessary that her body becomes a blueprint, not a failure, but of what happens to women who do not fit the throne they are given. As the narrator of her story, I don't ask you to mourn her as a queen. I ask you to mourn her as a woman who died in a room no one entered until it was too late. A mother whose child was taken before the lullaby finished, a voice that spoke too gently for the walls to echo. History might debate what she was, but I will tell you what she became. She became a silence, a warning, a question. What is power if it cannot protect the people it decorates? What is motherhood if it is weaponized against the woman who carries life? What is empire if it must chain its own empress to survive? We speak of crowns as symbols of glory, but perhaps the most honest crown is made not of gold, but of rust. The rust of keys that locked too many doors. The rust of blood dried on cold stone. The rust of memory that empire tries to scrub away and fails. So let this story not end in silence. Let it be a noise, a soft, persistent hum that lives in the back of your mind every time you see a painting, a palace, a name you almost forgot. Let her name live there. Maria Theresa of Naples, the Empress who gave birth in chains, and who was never meant to be remembered, but still is.